This is a great question, and I'm curious to hear what you guys say. So, what was the biggest challenge for you guys when it came to the shooting, and how'd you overcome it?
I think we touched on it a little bit earlier, but my biggest challenge was the fact that we were in a living location and only able to film in 2 day increments and then have 5 days off to make sure that we had a very consistent look across the film. And that's only really accomplished by lots of planning and a lot of trust. Trust in Christian that, he and I have the same vision, trust in my gaffer and my crew that they know what they're doing and they're going to be ready to go. Trust that I can send them off to go pre-light and that it'll get done. So yeah, it was lots of planning, diagrams, and trust. Really, 100% trust.
Yeah, I said we touched on it earlier, definitely the location. And I thought also another thing was trying to make my locations similar to yours, lighting wise, but also yet very different.
Yeah.
And so that took a lot of, thinking on and melding on because, great ideas don't come from you just thinking all the time. It's just more of like you sitting on an idea and something will come to you. And then that's how the thought of shooting on different lenses came about. And so that is, and I've always been kind of a great lover of Cook lenses after reading a lot of ASC magazines and just, oh, I love the look of this film, and researching it later. It's shot on Cook.
Yeah.
And knowing that it gives a certain look and, in my opinion, kind of elevates and stylizes, what you're filming. So I thought it would be a good juxtaposition between the reality of a robbery and then the white collar crime of senators and bank executives,
Embezzling, fraud, all those fun white collar ones.
yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I thought it was a brilliant idea, and it. There's another question in here about whether I had, shot on Cooks before. And yes, I had actually as a AC. There was a short film where we shot on the Cook Pancro Classics PL mount back in, oh man, that would have been probably like 2012 or so. And I loved them. I loved those lenses. And I, I didn't have any reservations about using Cook lenses, so much as it's, and you guys might know kind of where I'm going with this is sometimes there's this feeling when you're talking about different lenses and different cameras where in your head you're like, in theory that could work, but you just feel like you have to see it.
Right.
Like you feel like you have to see the way the glass handles the light, the way the glass handles the fall off, the way it handles the detail. And it made sense in my head, but it was like, I don't think that would be too different, right? Enough that it would be jarring,
Yeah.
but I think it would be different enough. And it was when you sent those tests, I was like, she called it.
Sold. Sold.
Yeah. So kind of going back to the biggest challenge, and you, Kate, talking about, kind of matching the look that Sedlack had kind of already, well, I say Sedlack kind of created, but to a certain degree, it was kind of all three of us that first weekend, right? There was, I think there was a lot of group think happening where, we had our model films and we had our ideas of the way this film was going to look, but it's like, it's not until you're in that space,
Yeah. And that's
and
the
you're
great thing
seeing it.
is, you know, as the DP, I have a very visual director and another great DP, and it's just like the meeting of the brain trust. And it's like it's too easy for the DP to be like, nope, this is my film, this is my look. I think it's a much stronger film by being like, oh, you know what? Actually, I didn't think of it like that. That's a great idea. Thanks, Kate. Or like, oh no, Christian, that's terrible. Let's not do that. Do it my way instead.
Yeah,
But that's the
yeah.
thing is like you're a visual director, Kate's an awesome DP, and like we kind of pinged all these ideas off of each other to really put aside like any type of egos or anything like that to make a better film.
Yes.
Not that there
Yes.
is any ego, but like you don't see that often where people have that kind of support early on.
Yes, absolutely. No, I agree. I agree. And again, another compliment that I don't know if I've passed it along enough, but in the early tests, we got a lot of, we did get a lot of notes from those camera oriented people that I kind of brought in that didn't know the story and any of that, but, kind of wanting to get a feel for what was working visually. And that was one of their main things was they were just like the way the threads visually kind of interwove and were had a unique style. We had clearly had a look. We clearly had a look to our film, but they said that like color palette wise and the way the camera told the story, they could with every time we went from outside the bank to inside the bank, they were aware of which character we were with before we saw that character.
Yeah. Because like even
And it
though we
was like,
are separate worlds, these worlds are still
right,
connected, so it couldn't be
right,
just completely removed.
right, right. So kudos to you guys for a job well done. Because yeah, we did it. When it comes to that look and that fusion, So the biggest challenge that I went through actually wasn't on set. My biggest challenge for this project was the fundraising. And obviously a lot of people, especially independent filmmakers will tell you like, finding money for your film, but it wasn't just, for me personally, it wasn't just, finding the money for the film that was difficult. It was a personal, it was a personal challenge that I had to overcome in that I've been raised in a way where I I earn what I get, right? Like I work hard and you bring home the bacon, right? Like that's kind of the way I've been raised. And so it it felt like almost selfish of me and like, to expect people to just hand over their money to get this film made, right? And my wife and producer basically said, well, then earn it. And I was like, duh, you're right. And so and she was like, everything you do in order to convince people to hand over $5 on Indiegogo or $100 or whatever, or when talking to your investors, like, earn it through the content that you're providing them. All of the videos that we did during the campaign, the theater presentation that we did, the inviting people to be on set and being a part of this. It was, and so for me, that was when I was able to overcome that. Was mentally, it's like, you're right. Just because this is not, a job and I don't get a paycheck, in order to get this film made, I can still earn it, and that was my biggest challenge and takeaway. So going into the look of the film, there was a distinct point in our time at Austin Movie Gear, me and John Sedlack, where the rental house got a set of Canon CNE primes. And we fell in love with those pretty quick. We were very familiar at that time with kind of the red combo of the red and the Zeiss compact primes. That was a really hot combo around that time. That would have been probably 2014 or 2015 when it seemed like that was really hot. And John, just talk a little bit about kind of why we fell in love with those Canon lenses, and why it was kind of almost like this challenge of like, we are going to make a feature film with these lenses.
Yeah, I mean, you talked a little bit about like how the CP2s were kind of like everybody's favorite at that time, and then the Cine E's were kind of like this underdog that flew under the radar. And we got them in at the shop, and so while Christian and I were working, we were actually just playing with lenses and doing lens tests and shooting little things, and falling in love. And I really liked the warmth that it gave us and kind of this human element. And I felt that, for Inside the Bank, where you're identifying with these characters going through this event, the look of those, like especially like with the CPs, they were very like crisp, clean. There wasn't any like life to those to me and to my eye, whereas the Canons had a little bit of grittiness to them. They had this warmth to them, not gritty like bad looking, but like more organic, something that you would see closer to like a classic lens. And to me, that's really what I wanted to kind of feel in there. Is I wanted that human, that organic feel, in there. And then there's also the added benefit of the rental house that we work at owned them, so we could use them and help with our budgets. And since we had used that red and Cine E combo pretty like frequently around the shop, it made us more familiar with that setup. So that way, going into this production where we were very limited in our time and only having those 2 days in 2 day chunks, it really helped speed things along because it was more intuitive. We didn't have to worry about like, oh, how's the light gonna hit the element and refract the. I don't really like. It becomes like second nature. That being said, we did want this secondary look, and so I think early on we talked about maybe having it like kind of lit differently or shot on a different camera for Kate. But that's when she's like, actually, I have some Cook S4s, and we were like, oh. So Kate, you want to talk a little bit about like your delving into the Cooks and selling them to us, which wasn't really that hard of a sell.
Well, I've always been intrigued by Cooks just from, as I said, watching movies always, and then like, oh, that one's really pretty. Like, and I've just gravitated towards the Cook look since probably I was 16, unbeknownst to myself.
Yeah.
And really delving into lenses probably post school more so than anything. Starting with the Overman project with us, because we rented an Angevin, which are actually the zoom lenses that they use to match the Cooks.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And so unbeknownst to myself, 10 years ago, I would have the opportunity to buy a set of Cook S4 minis. A really great deal popped in my lap, and I took it. And I figured it was the only way to probably actually be able to afford Cooks, because a regular set of Cooks, is the amount of a house anywhere in most of America, or a down payment in LA. So when I got to use Cooks, and it just made my dreams come true.
Well, and you've talked about the reasons for it fitting with the storyline, and we've talked about how the the lenses that we were using, the end result was, while they have a different look, we weren't afraid that they were going to clash too much, right? Was there anything, when you were looking at the final result, or if you were on set working with them, where it was kind of like a positive after effect, where it was just kind of like, oh, this is happening, like you're looking through the monitor on set and you're like, this is great, like, and it kind of either surprised you or kind of like in a good way,
I think it probably came down to on the very first day on set, and just seeing the fall off of the Cooks comparatively to the other lenses we were using for first unit. It really helped sell the difference between the two worlds. And really, when we think of, politicians and, CEOs and just executives. It's for the normal folk, it's just a world that we can't touch. And that's why the lenses that you guys went with the normal bank scene, like we go to the bank,
Yeah.
to drop, deposit checks. And it's a world that where everybody, the normal person is used to, and it feels very real. And I think that our lens choices really lend themselves to separate the worlds and make them really stand out to like what feels normal to the viewer.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
I would even go on
And
to
kind
add.
of, sorry, go ahead, John.
I was gonna say I would even go on to add, like, those politicians, those CEOs, they usually have a higher sense of self as opposed to community. And with that fall off that you have, you really did an amazing job kind of isolating those characters within those scenes so that they are prominent and they are, well, nope, it's me first, right? As opposed to thinking of a collective. And I think that you've throwing those cooks on there was the best decision that we could have done for kind of exploring that in a visual sense.
Absolutely. And I want to again give you guys another great compliment, and that is that you both essentially baked your look into your footage.
Yeah.
Like there was some tweaking that was made, but that was kind of part of the reason for these lens choices as well, in the sense that Canon, there's a particular warmth naturally to Canon lenses historically, and we not only were we trying to distinguish between the two worlds, but there was that warmth almost became a sweatiness the deeper into that conference room you got, right?
Yeah.
And obviously things can be graded. We're shooting on reds. You can change temperatures. You can, the way you light things. There's so many tools where you don't necessarily have to lean on the native look of your lens or of your sensor. But I think that both of you are such strong DPs that you are hoping that your colorist doesn't have to do much work. I would be my guess. But at the end of the day, we have the benefit of having that red raw that has so much latitude, that if there is something that needs to be tweaked, or if we decide to go in a different direction in post, that's there, because that's another one of the questions that someone sent in Production Hub that I think is definitely worth talking about. What cameras we shot on. So Sedlack, which reds were you on?
Yeah, so since we were in this tight, confined world, Christian and I, the helium had already been out when production had started, but with that 8K sensor just being so big, we wanted you to bring you in, and so we actually shot on the Dragon and the Scarlet to kind of really give you that sense of closeness inside the bank, because again, we wanted the audience to be feeling like they're right next to all of the action, that they are there with the other clientele dealing with this, trauma.
But well, guys, I can't thank you both enough for giving your time to give such thoughtful answers and kind answers. And I can't thank you enough for giving every bit of your heart and your soul into this project. I love you guys. Can't wait to see you in person. And Production Hub, Red Cameras, Canon Lenses, Cook Lenses. Thank you. Thank you guys for your time.
And thank you, Christian.
Yes.
Thank you for agreeing to play D&D as part of my payment.
Oh,
Thank you for investing this to make your vision come true.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys.